I'd also like to acknowledge Richard Miles, the local member for Corio, and our great Labor team. We have some exceptionally exciting announcements for you today, and I would now like to introduce Bill, our leader, to make that announcement for you.
Thanks, Libby. So is Libby Coker, Labor's candidate in Corangamite. Labor's really pleased, as part of our ongoing commitment to make healthcare and proper funding for hospitals one of the #1 issues in this election. We're really pleased to announce that we'll provide $40 million extra for Baxter House Hospital, and working in partnership with Premier Dan Andrews, as only federal Labor will be able to do, $50 million to create the first women and children's hospital in Geelong. And in addition, as part of our rolling out of our campaign to make sure that we assist Australians in their fight of their lives of cancer, we're going to provide an extra $15 million to Torquay Community Hospital. I congratulate Libby Coker on her advocacy for making sure that hospitals in Corangamite, and of course Richard Miles and Corio, hospitals in the Geelong region, get proper funding. You can only offer to guarantee the best possible support for health and hospitals because Labor's not going to give $77 billion to the top tier of tax earners, and we do not support a multi-billion-dollar tax cut for big corporations, including multinationals. As the election reaches its last 12 and 11 days, it's very clear that there is a stark choice in this election: better hospitals or bigger tax cuts for multinationals. I'd now like to hand over to Premier Dan Andrews to talk further about the exciting partnership to give Victorians the best possible health care.
Thanks very much, Bill, and thanks very much to the team at Deakin for having us along today. This is a fantastic announcement. It is a real partnership to provide even better care to the growing number of patients who need that care close to home, close to family and friends, and at the lowest price, whether that be in terms of time away from family or indeed hip pocket costs. To think that under a Shorten Labor government, we will have not only Geelong's first ever dedicated women's and children's hospital, but also a dedicated elective surgery centre, that is fantastic news. And I tell you, that certainly beats the 6 years of cutbacks that Victorian patients have had to endure under the current government. This is a great day for the people of Geelong, the Bellarine, the Surf Coast. It's a fantastic example of what can be achieved when you fund health properly. Then that's all about putting patients first. Conversely, if you cut hospital funding, you hurt patients. This is a fantastic announcement, and I know that when you think about the growth we've seen down here in this local community, we're going to go from about 2,500 babies born a year at the Geelong Hospital to more than 4,000 because of the investments that Bill has just announced. And in terms of elective surgery, and we know how frustrating it is for people to have to wait longer than they should for the care that they need, this $40 million investment, a dedicated, for the first time ever, dedicated elective surgery centre will mean that the number of people who can get day surgery in Geelong will go from 5,500 to 11,000. That sure beats cutting hospital funding. This is a real partnership to deliver real care, and I'm delighted, proud in fact, to stand here with Bill Shorten, who knows and understands that if you invest in health you can achieve great things. If you cut health funding though, you hurt patients. Bill Shorten understands that. He's the only one that does.
Thanks. And listen, talking of our babies being born, I just should record Chloe and my family's congratulations to the Sussexes on the arrival of a little baby boy, and as I've wisely done, I've consulted with Chloe and we'll be sending a little present. Bronwyn Bancroft, who's a very famous Australian Indigenous artist, she writes great books for children, so we're going to send little baby Sussex some great Australian children's literature. Over to you.
Mr. Shorten, we've seen an incident take place today with the Prime Minister and an attempted egging. I'd like to get your reaction to that, and also have you had your personal safety threatened at all throughout this campaign?
Let me be very clear. This is appalling and disgraceful behaviour. In Australia, we have violence-free elections. People are allowed to protest peacefully, but anything approaching violence is completely unacceptable. If this protester thinks that she will get any sympathy or support from me, she couldn't be more wrong. In terms of people making threats and vile comments, it can happen from time to time, but this is completely unacceptable and the Prime Minister has my complete sympathy, and of course the lady who got knocked down in the process.
Can I ask what you made of Mr Morrison took to Twitter immediately after he was convicted of what he said at military unions? Can I get your response to that message from the Prime Minister?
Oh, listen, I get that it was a very upsetting experience for him. I'm not going to judge. I think I do need to reiterate, though, this is not what we do in Australia. We're not one of those countries. This is not what we do. It doesn't matter if you're the extreme left or the extreme right, or indeed in between. This is appalling and disgraceful behaviour. No sympathy or support. This is not what we do in Australia.
Do you support the Greens' call to have a codified racial vilification law to suppress the media, in particular, to apply to media commentators?
Oh, I haven't heard about that at all, so I can't add any.
I spoke about it in the speech last year, and it's again in the media this week.
I don't. You follow Richard and Natali more carefully than I do.
Mr. What will it mean today when interest rates are cut?
Well, the Reserve Bank of Australia is independent, and they need to make that decision free of any pressure from anyone in politics. I mean, it's a bit of a wicked situation for them, isn't it? On one hand, everyone knows the economy is wallowing in mediocrity, but on the other hand, it's 10 or 11 days before an election, so anything they do will be viewed, through that political pressure. I'm going to leave it to them. But one thing I do know, and I don't need the RBA to tell us this, is that everything's been going up except people's wages. We're at 0% inflation. 1 million Aussies are doing 2 jobs or more just to make ends meet. And this economy is not firing on all cylinders. It is a problem for Australia.
Mr. Shorten,
Sorry, hi.
how would you ram your tax reforms through the Senate when the prospective crossbench plans to torpedo them?
Get as many people as possible to vote Labor at the election.
Do you really think it's stupid to cost your climate policy, following your comments last time on Q&A? Surely the taxpayers want to know the cost of what your climate change policy is going to be.
Yeah, I didn't mean any offence to anyone who, in this matter, but let's be blunt. The idea that you can have a debate about the cost of taking action on climate change without taking cost of the inaction on climate change is only looking at half the puzzle, isn't it? It's like taking one piece of the jigsaw and pretending it's the whole puzzle. Sorry. Go on, no, I'm giving you a go. Next one. Sorry. No.
Would your 45% emissions reduction target cost the Australian economy?
My view hasn't changed on that question from last night to today. And, Australians are fed up with people getting the wrong end of the telescope and make it turn into a microscope on the cost of taking action on climate change. Australians know. They know that if we... Sorry, can I have the chance to finish your question? Australians know that politics is broken in this country because we don't take action on climate change. Plenty of companies, large companies, you may have shares in them, I don't know, are already decarbonising. They're reducing their carbon pollution. I have seen with my own eyes the solar wind farms of big industrial operations, without which, if they hadn't made that investment, which you might call a cost, but smart companies call an investment, we wouldn't see these factories and these plants still being open.
So
Richard.
Yeah, so it's just to follow Ali's question though, so you're saying that there will be no costing number put on your climate change policies before the election, even...
Richard, let's go through it. I understand the interest of the Australian in this question, so let's be upfront. Cost to taxpayer, much more expensive under the government. You would probably know that they're spending $3 billion plus over the next 15 years just to pay big polluters not to pollute. That's much more than we're proposing. We're proposing to provide some money, $300 million, to help the energy-intensive trade-exposed sector, aluminium, cement, steel, cope with change, but that's far less for the taxpayer than the current government. Then we look at the cost to the environment. Well, there is no debate. I don't even think even the most extreme right-wing climate deniers, well, I guess they do, but most other people recognise that there is a cost to environmental inaction. It's happening every day. And in terms of businesses, smart businesses are already investing in change. This country, the politics is broken. We've got a government who is dragging its feet. If you really think there is a cost to taking action on climate change, then why have 2 million Australian households already invested in solar? They understand, we understand, most thinking people understand action on climate's important. Sorry, I'll come to you in a
Wall
moment.
Street Journal. Can I quickly ask 2 issues? Labor has apparently written to Tencent, the owner of WeChat, about and messages circulating in Chisholm. I just wondered, what is your concern there? Are you worried it's really denting your chances in that seat among Chinese Australians? And secondly, the US is preparing to unveil a new policy towards the Pacific with new bases to be built in Micronesia. You spoke last night about more nuance in foreign policy, but I'm just wondering how much sharper you think the choices are becoming facing Australia.
It's great to have the Wall Street Journal here, and it's even greater to have my Foreign Affairs spokesperson here, so why don't I give Penny a run on these issues?
Thanks very much. Can I first respond on the WeChat issue? There are very serious and concerning reports, deeply concerning reports, about fake news, malicious content being circulated on the Chinese media platform WeChat. What is even more concerning is reports of those being linked to the Liberal Party. So our message to the Prime Minister is this. This is not what we do in Australia. We have robust political debates. We don't have major political parties engaging in fake news on this media platform or any other media platform. So it is incumbent upon Scott Morrison to rule out any Liberal Party involvement in the malicious, false content that is circulating on WeChat. We had foreign interference laws which passed our parliament not that long ago. And we did that because we want to ensure there is no interference in Australia's election, that our democracy remains sovereign. Well, the Prime Minister needs to make sure that his party does the right thing. In relation to the various discussions, both on trade policy but also on the Pacific, we've already announced, Bill announced at the Lowy Institute, our support for and our intention to make the Pacific front and centre in Labor's foreign policy, and certainly that is the way we would approach it, and we will continue to work with the US on constructive engagement in the region.
Mr Shorten, about 1 million people have voted in pre-polling, and some within your party have expressed concern that perhaps the time that pre-polling has been open is too long. Do you share those views, and would you look at the issue after the election?
Well, I think it's a range of politicians across the spectrum, including Josh Frydenberg, Anthony, Karen Phelps, have expressed some views about the intense pre-poll activity. We can review these things after an election, but my focus is on the election. My focus is on explaining to people the value of voting for Labor. I personally think one of the themes which is leading to the early pre-poll activity is a mood for change. People have had a look at the fact that Scott Morrison voted 10 times to introduce business tax cuts. He spoke on 205 times, I'm informed, on the benefit of business tax cuts. He's only not put in the business tax cuts for the top end of town, for the big businesses, because Labor and the crossbench blocked him. He's never once said it was a bad idea. He's never once declared it was the wrong thing to do. And with all of his deals with Clive Palmer, I have no doubt that if Scott Morrison was to be re-elected, this would be right up the top of the list for him to do, quick as a flash, back in there trying to argue the case for $80 billion worth of tax cuts for big business. And I have to say, when we're down in Geelong, and you can see the vision of thousands of extra patients being able to get medical care in their own community, a women and children's hospital working with the Victorian government, radiation treatment available on the Surf Coast. The choice is as clear as day and night. A vote for Labor is for better hospitals. A vote for the current mob is a vote for more tax cuts for multinationals. So I'll come to you in a second, Mark. I beg your pardon.
Mr Shorten, obviously the RBA will make its interest rates later on today. You've said you're due to release your costings later on this week. Will the RBA's rate decision, if it's a cut, alter the timing or the costings of your policies? And if so, how?
Well, first of all, we'll release our costings at the end of this week, and so all will be revealed then. In terms of the RBA cut, I don't want to make this press conference so long that, in fact, they make the announcement whilst we're here. We'll have to, I think, wait and see. It is a wicked problem for the RBA, isn't it? We all know this economy is going backwards. We know there's a torpor, a malaise in the economy under the current bunch.
What will it affect your costings?
Well, we'll find out on Friday, and let's see what the Reserve Bank does. One thing I can say is that we are committed to funding healthcare in this country. We are committed to reversing the cuts to hospitals. We're committed to making sure that our Medicare system is not only safe from the government, but is improved under a Labor administration. We can make these promises for better healthcare and better hospitals because we're not giving $77 billion away to the top-end tax earners, and we're never going to give $80 billion away to big business. Last question, Mark.
On Eliza's question, it's a real issue. I know you say you want people to vote for Labor, but nobody expects Labor to have an overwhelming majority in the Senate after this election. It's a half-Senate election. I'm sorry that's a shock for you. But the crossbench will still control the balance of power. Nobody respects mandates in the Australian Parliament these days, least of all the Senate, and you know that. So what is your message to these Senate crossbenchers who are saying on the record they will block the main parts of your program to fund all these promises you're making, or do you have a plan B?
What I would say, first of all, to Australians is let's not have 3 more years of minority parties controlling the Senate. I say to Australians, if you're sick of the last 6 years, 3 Liberal Prime Ministers, 5 Defence Ministers in 6 years, 13 energy policies, 23 reshuffles, if you're sick of the chaos, if you're not excited by the idea that you voted for Tony Abbott and got Malcolm Turnbull, you voted for Malcolm Turnbull and got Scott Morrison, and you vote for Scott Morrison and get Clive Palmer and Pauline Hanson calling the shots, vote Labor at the next election. Beyond that, I'm not so quick as you, Mark, to dismiss the concept of mandate. I think even our harshest critics would say that we're putting our policies out there first. So I do believe we will have a mandate, and I'm a very determined person. I don't think the Australian people want to see multinationals treating Australian tax laws as a doormat, wiping their feet as they head off to the Cayman Islands, especially with Australian health assets. I don't think the Australian people think that tax cuts for the top end are more important than getting vital health care in Australia. Thanks, everybody. Did say last question. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.